Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
We co-host Rich Gear, and we got an interesting kind of a potpourri of things we're going to talk about as far as evolution today. Doug, what's the name of the show today?
Well, why believe in evolution against all odds? And we're going to discuss a little bit about the odds of evolution today, but maybe also a little bit about the psychology of evolutionists and why they continue to believe in evolution, even though there's a whole lot of evidence that we've discovered.
A plethora of evidence that goes the other way. Yes, it's true.
And so I'd like to challenge you to just listen to us a little bit about what the odds of evolution ever occurring. And somebody likened it to, I remember I was, I think it was in junior high or something like that, where we had a little session at the Methodist Church where they talk about, well, let's argue with an atheist or a playboy, and he came in and he said that, he believed in evolution. Well, somebody brought up the suggestion that believing in evolution is like believing that you can take your jigsaw puzzle and just dump it on the table and have it all self-assemble. And that sort of stuck with me. I said to myself, well, that is really true. How do you have that stuff all come together? And this was back when I didn't understand thermodynamics and understand how things all work together. We're independent with each other, and so as a budding scientist back then, I sort of took that to heart, and that was probably one of the things that started me on this path of creationism, is that the jigsaw puzzle dump analogy. And I found out that when I started studying chemistry and studying all the different things that would have to come together to produce life in the test tube, that was another thing that you have the evidence for creation that I found out later, that you have DNA that makes RNA, which makes with transfer RNA and messenger RNA, they create ribosome RNA, and they all come together to produce a little manufacturing process. So like a NC tape machine, that you read this code and it produces a protein. Well, the protein, one of the proteins it produces is the protein that makes DNA. Or it's called DNA polymerase, and it's the one that sort of encases itself around the DNA as it's being made to keep it from kinking.
Oh, really?
And it's producing this double helix. And so it sort of keeps everything into place, and this manufacturing process works that way. So you have to have DNA to make proteins, you have to have proteins to make DNA. So which came first, Mr. Chicken?
Yeah, Mr. Chicken. Doug, you said that the jigsaw puzzle analogy is interesting, but see, but I'll even go further than that. It's the fact of the matter is, it'd be like mixing non-puzzle pieces in with the puzzle that look kind of similar but have nothing to do with what the picture's supposed to be. Stuff elements, just even having things that have just random pieces,
right,
don't really do anything. It reminds me of the old joke, Doug, about the guy. He says, I can do anything that God can do, and so it says, God, whatever you could do, I can do. And so the voice from heaven says, all right, I created man out of the dust of the earth, and the guy says, oh, I can do that. And he goes to grab up a handful of dust, and God says, get your own dirt.
That's right, yeah.
In other words, you don't even have the building, you don't have anything without something out of nothing. Even the most ardent cosmic evolutionist, the Big Bang Theory, has something coming out of nothing, virtually. You have this, what do they call it, the dot, the dot, whatever it is, and out of that, everything in the universe has been created. It's almost nonsensical unless you're sold into a materialistic origin of everything. It's just, because everything, the puzzle, indicates there was something in front who had a picture in mind. So where did that picture, you know what I mean? There's an actual end product in mind before you dump the puzzle pieces. So it's even stronger, Doug. What if you had no picture in mind? It's just you got to come up with a picture. Get your own dirt, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Now, you know, the other, you know, there was a bunch of little memes or things that got me thinking back when I was a youngster. And the one question that was asked is, how come it is that you have 5 fingers on each hand, but how come they grow out to a certain length and then just stop? Well, why don't they just keep on growing? And but they're all perfectly proportioned to be useful in the hand, you know. And so if you have a finger that grows out to be about 10 inches long, or if it's not long enough, you know, what regulates, what causes, what computer program in your body causes that to just grow out to a certain length?
Reminds you of the Job scriptures as who creates a barrier for the surf, you know, the waters, it doesn't go past a certain length. Certain things that are set up and designed, Doug, to be what they are, and that you cannot almost, even again, the most ardent evolutionists, atheistic evolutionists, usually ends up stealing from the Christian worldview, or the theistic worldview anyway, and they talk about design, or order, or whatever. And it's always an amazing thing when you think about that. I says, no, there's no order, it's all random, and yet it isn't. We know it's not random, and everything inside of us looks at it and says, there seems to be something, an intelligence that's much greater than us that's programmed things into existence. Even, you know, and what I find what's really fascinating, Doug, when I go to colleges or even seminaries, Christian ones especially, the theologians, by the way, are the worst ones. The scientists tend to sometimes realize, well, there's things we don't get. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are polemicists for evolution in the scientific world, but I'm saying a lot of scientists are very open to the God concept, if you will, because they've seen empirically how things just don't self-replicate. They don't self-order. They don't come into being from nothing. We've said this many times on our show, Doug. Properties inherent in matter do not self-replicate, do not organize themselves into something greater. They never do. Okay? So, anyway. So, Doug, what are some of the odds? What do we got?
Well, you know, the one other thing that, you know, I realized when I was young was somebody pointed out to me that, you know, on the dolphin, why is it that you have the nose in the back of the head? How did it get there from a air-breathing creature on land to go back to the back of your head?
Because that's the premise. Dolphins were originally in the water and then went on land and then came back to the waters.
Right, and so that you know that sort of got me thinking about that. And you have a lot of these evolutionists will say, well, we have all these fossils that are sort of show a progression from a land animal to the Pachycetus and Ambulocetus and things of that sort. Well, if you take a look at them, you know, they're so fragmented and fabricated. You know, the parts that are important are the ones that they drew in and make up. And so,
which is the way it is, Doug, through the entire paleontological record. When you try to fill in missing links, pretty much they make the stuff up out of whole cloth. We've seen that over the years in many things, but yeah.
And so the reason for this show is, you know, we gave some quick hitters of you know, reasons to not to believe in evolution. Why is it that people believe in evolution against all these odds? And you know, I see it as it's a ultimate excuse for bad behavior. People really find it a convenient excuse to believe in evolution, because then they don't have to answer to a God. And then you know, there's also a lot of peer pressure to believe in evolution. If you have somebody who's working in a university setting, and you know, they have people who they really are not that fond of going to church or being part of the Christian life, well, then you find that there's a pressure that they become into the ascendant, and there's a pressure to accept an evolutionary worldview. And I've been editing editing a book about that Jerry Bergman is writing about the compromises, early compromises when Darwin came out with the theory years ago, and people have bought into that, and taken a theistic evolution point of view, and so that's a quick and easy way to gain acceptance within your professional community, within the university setting,
Right.
and so, but to still perhaps retain a semblance of Christianity in your point of view. And he's the Methodist Church. Not all the Methodists are like this, but there was one of them came up with the idea of the Preadamite race.
That was in the Pentecostal church quite heavily too.
Yeah, it was.
Jesse Penn Lewis in the Earth's earliest ages. The pre-Adamic race, which gives you your Genesis 1. Before Genesis 1 or 1:1 and 1:2, there was this whole world that existed before Adam and Eve. Okay,
right.
That's really where we get the gap theory from. A lot of that,
Yeah, and that theory I see as a very dangerous thing, because the primary motivation for that was a racist motivation. They believed that the black race and some of the indigenous peoples were not of the race of Adam. They were pre-Adamites, and that they evolved from the apes, and they were not of the line of Adam and Eve. And so that gave them justification for slavery, for...
You're talking from the theistic point of view.
The theistic
Because Darwin has done does the same thing from a secular viewpoint. In other words, the apes, everything was millions of years ago. So man has a propensity to find out ways to put down other people.
Right.
Man has an incredible genius, or of basically figuring out how they're superior to somebody else. And we always figured out, it still reminds me of I remember the old Mad magazine when I was a kid. And there was a cartoon called Dave Bird's The Lighter Side, and there was these little girl, little boy, and their mother was cutting the pie, and the pie she measured out, and the girl starts crying. Could have been the boy, just this the girl's crying. My piece is not as big as this, so she measured it out a third time with a micrometer, which is an old tool back in the 60s they had. Now they're exactly the same. She says, "Yeah, but I want mine to be exactly like his, but I want mine to be bigger."
Oh, okay.
And so what happens is people will use the gap theory, but which allowed early evolutionary stages to happen, or you have the secular evolutionists, which doesn't allow for that, but they said they have millions of years. Either way, Doug, it allows human beings to put other human beings down.
Yeah,
So,
and that seems to be sort of a easy thing to fall into, and we've been seeing a lot of the repercussions of racism in our society today, and we're seeing a lot of rioting and things of that sort, which is obviously not good. But it's also made me aware, and made a lot of other people aware, that there's still a lot of inherent racism left in this world that needs to be dealt with and fixed.
But Doug, without God in their life, it's never going to be fixed.
No, it isn't.
It's like when Jesus said, "The poor will always be with you." You're going to have people who do not submit to God and Jesus Christ Himself. Always, there's going to be room for people to use whatever theology they want. I call Darwinism a theology, as well as the theistic evolution a theology. One has God, one does not have God, but it's a faith, okay? It's a walk, but it allows them to subscribe to the lowest impulses. When the scripture is very clear, when from one blood all the nations of the earth have arisen, What excuse do you have to hate somebody because he has more or less melanin in their skin? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Doesn't make any sense, you know?
And, I was in Carol's room the other day with you watching the old Western. And you had people shooting up each other, but there's this guy who was, shot an Indian, and the Indian fell down on the ground dead. And I got to thinking is that we were sort of grew up with that and thought nothing of that. Cowboys and Indians, and we played cowboys and Indians, and we thought the Indians were some inferior race at that time. And the thing of it is, if you take a look at that, if you here's this dead Indian on the ground, and they didn't show his funeral, what the Indians did to bury their dead or anything like that, or the grief that the Indian tribe might have had because they lost one of their members. We didn't see any of that growing up.
See, here's the thing, Doug. Because without submitting to Christ, what happens is then, and I think of the French Revolution. Okay, the royalty was a bunch of buttheads, really, and they put the people that I'm better than you because I'm royal. Well, then they had the French Revolution, right? And guess what? The people that rose up were worse than the royalty.
That's right. Yeah.
The point of it is, now is there such thing as reverse racism? I said, it's all just racism. If you hate somebody because they don't look like you, that's part of it. It's all based on faulty theology or secularism, or if you will, a lot of it's Darwinian thinking. Because the gap theory, Doug, we talked about, really wanted to open up avenues for the great lengths of time which the geologists were proposing back in the turn of the 19th century. So those are the things. And by the way, the genius of the devil is this. He sets it up first with geology so that when Darwin's book came in, he had the time he needed. Because no one's ever seen evolution happen.
Right.
We know, I mean, the eminent guy, Richard Dawkins, was asked the question, what was the best example of an increase of complexity or at the genomic level? And he was Stahl on camera. It felt like 15 minutes. It was probably more like about 30 seconds. It might have been 2 minutes. Whatever it was. And then he said, turn the camera off. I said, but you should be able to come up with something of the fact. But Doug, they do this, and I think your point is right. It's very well taken. It's really not a scientific issue. It's a moral issue.
Right. Yeah.
You don't want to submit to a God who's over you. And there's other reasons, Doug. Not only is it because you just want to be a rebellious person. Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes you feel like God has betrayed you. You feel like He's let you down because we live in a broken world. Again, the Scripture talks about that, Doug. It talks about Adam and Eve, who basically He gave them the ability to decide what they wanted to do. He told them the rules, and they disobeyed them. And we've been paying for it ever since. But that's not the end of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. Now for the rest of the story is the gospel message.
That's right.
It all makes sense, but because of rebellion, because of hurt, because of situations, we want to use an excuse to run away from the God who really wants good things for you, but we're going through, it's kind of like Doug saying a muscle's going to be strong if it never exercises.
Right.
To learn how to do right, you've got to see things that are wrong, at least in this broken world. Maybe at one time we didn't have to do that. I've asked guys, why did you let Adam and Eve do that, Lord? And I don't understand fully the whole premise about that. You get into all kind of cosmological and the theological stuff. We're not really here to do that tonight, but you start thinking about things, it's like, but there are things called axioms. It is what it is. Adam fell, the world was broken, hurts happen. Rebellion is still in our genome because Adam and Eve are our father and mother, and they rebelled. So it's all there, but we have a hope now. We're not subjected to futility. There's a hope there. But Doug, you talk about odds. We generally present a lot of scientific arguments, but I get irritated with secularists who steal from the Christian worldview to try to justify their existence, and they try to hammer me saying, "Well, you're lying." And I'm going, well, we're not lying. We could be wrong about something, but we're not lying.
No.
But even if we were, who cares? From a non-theistic viewpoint, lying is irrelevant.
That's right.
I mean, you know?
Yeah, I remember Jerry Bergman was talking about that, and he says that one of his friends when he was an atheist was Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
That was one of his friends?
Yeah, it was one of his
Dr.
friends.
Bergman? Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he hung out with all the atheists. You know,
Yeah, he was.
his mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and his father was an atheist, and he was an ardent Jehovah's Witness first, and then didn't work, and so he went to atheism, and that didn't work. He saw the same cultish tendencies in atheism as he did in the Jehovah's Witness, and so he said, "There's got to be something different." And finally, he came about it. But he said that about Madalyn Murray O'Hair is that she says that, and Jerry had pointed out to him after he had, to her after he had started investigating Christianity.
Okay.
He said that she said that one of the reasons to why she was an atheist is she didn't have to justify her actions. She could do anything that she wanted. She had the freedom to do anything that she wanted.
Yep.
And she didn't have to hold to any moral code. So she could lie, she could cheat, she could steal, she could do anything that she wanted to. Mm-hmm. And that's basically who she was. I also wanted to mention there are actually two different survival of the fittest doctrines, which translate themselves into economic systems. And the one is socialism, the other is capitalism. And they're different in many ways, but they all start with a Darwinian premise of survival of the fittest. And the capitalist believes that economic competition is a good thing because it sort of weeds out anything that doesn't work. And to an extent, that is true, and it works. I think it works better than the socialist, which is basically it's a system of envy based upon you have people who believe that it's the state's responsibility to make things all even, and it's a revenge concept where you have people who don't have enough, and they believe that it's all the rich people that have got it.
Of course, the lie put to that part of it is you always have what they call, well, in Russia they had the vanguard of the proletariat,
right?
Which means we're the elite guys. We got all the money, the best vodka. This was Russia. This was communism, which is the ultimate result of it. People don't understand that Nazism, National Socialist Party, and communism, it isn't like they're on one side. You know, we're in the middle. You know, and then communism's over here on the left, and Hitlerism, fascism on the right. No, they're all socialists. They're all over here on the left. Okay, and the state, not only state control, it's the idea that man is God. Mm-hmm. Man can control what you do, and they're not, and they do that because they love the control, because they know it's a lie in the sense that the natural state of man is pretty much selfish and greedy. There are people that are not, but generally speaking. Generally not speaking, but most people are looking out for their own self-interest.
Right.
So socialism doesn't work, but they both have atheistic proponent. Well, they both have atheistic proponents to it. That's when you use capitalism for merely survival of the fittest, the strongest will survive. Yeah, that's a Darwinian concept.
Yeah, and what you have is the devil uses that to play each one against each other. So you just have upheaval and unrest based upon that. And the Christian way is something different than both. In my mind, I think it's something that is actually based on a giving concept, where it's something that is not intuitive if you're of the world, that by being generous and being a blessing to other people, you can actually reap a benefit in the long run, because people begin to trust you and know that the work that you do is honest and blessing.
who was that? I can't think of the economist. Was it Adam Smith or somebody? He talked about the invisible hand. Really was God. It's not like accident, okay? And his capitalistic worldview is more of that regard. You try to create something that's good. But of course, the secularists come in and they want to basically manipulate the system to their own advantage. And there's always going to be people like that in a broken world like we have. So Doug, what else do we got in here? Anything? You talk about peer pressure, and compromise is easy.
Yeah, it's easy to. It's a lazy thing. Like if let's say you're a physicist and you think that the physics of radioisotope dating is correct, that gives the long ages. Well, but you believe that that's so because you believe the geologists. Now, the geologist believes that the biologists actually have. And the biologist believes the paleontologist.
They know each one of them is not the answer. Yep.
And so really, the only way that you can really make sense of all of this is to take a multidisciplinary approach and be a generalist and have knowledge of all these different areas and put them together. And that's what a lot of the creationists are like. Is that there's two extremes. You either know nothing about everything, or you know everything about nothing.
But Doug, I think the point you had there is also bucking against the stream is hard, and it can be costly. We found that out with how many creationists, Doug, as scientists that come out in favor of creation, and they get fired from their job, and they get ostracized, or they get ridiculed, or they can't get published. There's a lot of things like that that go on, and that's cult-like behavior. That's not fair. That's not right. And yet, the whole idea of fairness, if you're secular and atheistic, you don't have to be fair. You said Madeline Murray Harris said it just right. She has no moral restrictions, but they want you to have moral restrictions.
That's right.
They'll use that, okay? And of course, so people do what they do. They jump on the bandwagon. They basically get on there and they go along to get along, so to speak. And I understand that's very, very hard not to do. That's a natural human tendency.
Well, there's a lot of people who are mad at God. For one reason or other, they've lost loved ones, or they've had a bad experience in church, or somebody looked at them the wrong way and accused them of certain things unfairly, and that's part of life. Part of living is that you need to get past all this and to be able to ask yourself, is there really a God? Does he love me? Does he care about me?
Don't sell your birthright for a bowl of pottage. In other words, this life is going to end, but there's eternity afterward. Don't sell eternal life short for things for temporary, even if you have hurts, betrayals, and wounds. You need, Doug's right, to get past that is hard, but there is a God who is able to help you get past that. You don't have to depend on evolutionary scenarios or atheistic scenarios to get, and settle for this life only. This life is not all there is.
So I hope you enjoyed this. Don't get on the bandwagon and think that all scientists believe in evolution. There's all sorts of scientists who are true believers in Christianity, and most of them are the ones who made the significant discoveries. We hope you enjoyed our show. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.
Bye-bye.